All right, and after 6 hours, we're back from the light box. So let's get a drum roll. What's up, guys? We're in for another restoration. This is Vintage Kicks Gallery, and these are a pair that I got from the last overnight from Japan unboxing. I think they were around 270 bucks, but this is how they came in. 1985 Chicago ones, and these are super beat, but they were cheap. All right, I've got this shoe prepped with a shoe tree because the shape is just so bad right now. So I've been kind of lasting it back. And when we add the water and maybe a little bit of steam, the shape's gonna come all the way back, but I wanted to get a head start on that. So let's get started, put this to the side and pull out the laces. All right, laces are out. I'm gonna throw them in my cleaning solution here. And let's take a good look at this pair here. I mean, they're bad, but they're not that bad. The white, I think, is going to just need to be really cleaned up and maybe use an abrasive pad on it, but it definitely doesn't need to be repainted. The toe box needs a little bit of work, but I think once we get the shape back into it, we can use some Angelus shoe stretch and the heat gun to take out that hard creasing. And I really don't think it needs to be repainted. We may use some white shoe polish on it, but it's looking pretty good. The red definitely is gonna need a new paint. I would do this paintless, but I don't see one clean panel of the red on this entire shoe. So it's gonna save us time and be a better product if I just paint it. So we'll leave the white original, paint that, and then we'll address the vinyl on these collars, and I'm going to show you guys how to reapply a vinyl coat and restore a factory look to it. So I'm going to start off with a medium bristle brush. Just do the outside, just like normal. You'll really get the uppers here of this leather because they are really, really dirty. They don't look like they've been worn in years and years and years. Not quite sure if these need a sole swap yet. We won't know until I get this completely done. But the plan is to resell these, so I'm probably gonna offer them both ways. Offer them with a sole swap or without. So we will see. Depends on if somebody wants to wear them, if they need a sole swap or not. And a lot of people that just collect them stray away from anything with the sole swap already. All right, this is getting nasty already, so I'm gonna grab my towel. Let's keep going. These are TH factory, by the way, which is pretty rare for a pair of Chicagos. So for those of you that don't know, there were a few factories that made the Chicago colorway, and that would be TY, BY, and TH. And from my experience, TH is definitely the rarest of those. I think BY is probably the most common. If anybody can tell me what TH or BY stands for, I'll be grateful forever. All right, I'm gonna switch to the soft bristle brush to do these, the first coat on the tongues here. They need a little work, and we're probably gonna use OxyClean on the white and the label here, the tongue tag, at the very end to really whiten this up, but I do wanna see what the Angelus does to it, and I am using Angelus Easy Cleaner, by the way. All right, I'm gonna put these brushes to the side and grab the electric one, and what this does is just offers a little bit more scrubbing power. You use it the exact same way, but it is a little loud, so watch out. Want to really get into the white with this and clear out some of the stitching. The best thing these are used for is to clean the stitching on shoes, and this is going to make a mess. What I'm doing is using this on the really bad areas of the white, and it is power scrubbing this. It's looking great. All right, now I'm going to move on to these soles. And I'm not gonna do a whole lot with the soles right now because we are gonna whiten them, and I'm just gonna go ahead and use the power scrubber here to just get everything off the top. And I'll probably use a magic eraser prior to the whitening process, but we'll address that when the time comes. All right, now let's take a look here. Got most of the dirt off of here. I think what I'm gonna do is wipe these down, throw them on the dryer, and then assess. So I'll be right back. And we're back, and it's a new day. What do you think? Not too bad, right? All right, now we need to get the surface prepped and ready for paint. After looking at the white, I think we're gonna have to put some paint on here too. Wasn't really planning on doing that, but they are missing a little more than I thought. So it's not a big deal. I do like to keep things as original as possible, and this makes them a little less original, but I would rather have a better product at the end than seeing some patches of paint on, which is the situation we're in. All right, to prep these, we're just using some acetone and cotton balls. And we're gonna take off the top layer of paint here and the protective coat as well. When doing this, make sure you do red panels with red panels and white panels with white panels, because you mix it up, that paint goes right on the white, and paint plus acetone, it's gonna be pink. Obviously don't acetone the Wings logo. Shouldn't have to say that, but you never know. Because if you get anywhere near there, it's gonna bleed out and it looks bad. All right, you know the surface is prepped and ready when it starts to change tint a little bit on the Chicago and the sheen is completely gone. So we're getting pretty close with the red. And we're not gonna do all the white, so we're gonna have to blend it out. But we are going to do some of it. Almost finished. All right, we are ready to start laying down the red, and the red is a mixture of Angela's Varsity and red, just plain red. And it's a pretty dead-on match with this particular pair of Chicago's. So as some of you already know, I don't really tape anything off because I'm just careful around the edges. And one tip that I always say, if you're restoring an older pair or really just doing any custom or restoring anything, don't paint the stitching. All right, that's gonna do it on the red. What do you think? Turned out pretty good. Before we move on to the white, I want to address this creasing. I don't know if you can see it on here, but take a look at how bad it is. So the way we're gonna do this is we're going to use Angelus shoe stretch and a heat gun. For those of you who have never done this before, you have to apply a ton of heat to get these creases out, but it does work really well. I don't really recommend trying this on a nice pair your first time out because you have to get it so hot that you take the chance of burning it, and you don't want to try it on anything expensive. So go to a thrift store, go to something like that, get a beater pair, try it on that first, and then once you're comfortable, try it on something nice. So the way this works is you soak the area in shoe stretch first. So I'm going to do the whole toe box and then this area up here, the red of the toe box. And I'm doing this before we paint because you apply so much heat that fresh paint, I don't think it's a good idea to mix those two. It's probably not the best idea to do it on the red right now, but I didn't think about it ahead of time, so we have to do it. Right, so I'm gonna give that a few seconds to soak in while I get the heat gun. Oh, and I'm back. All right. So we're gonna have to repeat this process a few different times. I don't know how many times it's gonna take, but I'm gonna get started. So with a heat gun, never leave it in the same area for too long. You wanna keep it moving, but you do have to get it very close to the crease and apply a shitload of heat. All right, the one on the red is fixed. Let's put more shoe stretch on the top and really go at the creasing in the toe box area. So it's still gonna look kind of bad right after we do it. So I'm gonna wait and show you the after we get the white laid down, and I think it's gonna look pretty good. One other tip when doing this, never have the laces in because the laces will either melt or catch on fire. And I'm not joking. All right, I'm feeling pretty good about this, so we're gonna go ahead and move on to the white. And after we get a couple coats of the white down, we will go ahead and assess if there's any more crease removal that's needed. You know, this is a used pair. It doesn't have to be absolutely perfect. The closest we can get to a restored, properly for the aged look is what we're going for. This pair started off pretty rough, but I'm starting to think that these are gonna come around because so far, so good. All right, the white is simply a mixture of Angelus flat white and cream with a little bit of duller. And one thing on a pair of 85s in this colorway, you want to use two different finishers. So after we lay down the white, we'll assess the whole paint job. But before we do the actual final acrylic finisher on top, we're gonna mix up one that's matte finish with a little bit of duller inside of it and lay that down on the white. And then we're gonna use the standard matte finish on the red. The reason being, if you look at a factory paint job like that, you'll notice the white is a little bit duller than the red. So that's what we're trying to mimic. As always, you want very little paint on the brush, And I like to start in a nice open area first. Kind of spread the paint evenly. Mix up the brush strokes so you can't see it. And see, I'm kind of like pushing the paint in. It's just a habit I have. You don't have to do that, but you do want to make sure you're getting thoroughly into the grain of the leather. If you just do a light coat on top, sometimes this Angelus paint is so thick it sits there and then you don't see the actual leather grain. When painting a toe box also, watch out for the perforations. You don't want to load those up with paint. If you do get paint in there, it's not the end of the world. You can use a dental pick or a pen, anything like that, stick it in there and clear it out. But you want to do that right away, because if paint dries in there, it kind of changes the look of them, and we're going for a natural look. If you have white areas that are really bad, and I'm talking, you know, a little worse than this, you want to use a opaque white versus the Angelus semi-transparent. And the reason being, you have to load so many coats on to cover soiling and stains of the leather that, again, you lose that grain of the leather and you don't have a natural look. So I'm gonna do probably 3 to 5 extremely thin coats. And I hate using the heat gun, but I'm going to do that to speed up the process and dry it between each coat. And by the end of it, we'll see how they look. If you don't trust yourself and you have to tape these off, make sure you tape around the edges, the raw edges of the leather. You never want to get paint on those. I can't tell you how many pairs I see that have been either restored or if they're customs. And if people don't tape that off, it sticks out like a sore thumb. This raw look, this raw edge on leather and on Durabuck and everything on these older shoes is what gives them that definition, because you see the lines of the shoe, and when you take that away, you can't really put your finger on it, but it kind of blurs the image of the shoe. All right, I think this is gonna be the last coat. Go ahead and take a look. So, what do we think? And here's a look at the creasing. All right, so now it's time to mix up the acrylic finisher. So we're gonna go ahead and apply that with the airbrush. I'm gonna go ahead and mix that up, and then we're going to address these collars. And for that, we're gonna need a little tape. So I'll be back, and these will be taped off. All right, I lied. We are going to put the acrylic finisher on before we tape them up, because I think it'll be safer for this fresh paint. So what I'm gonna do is use 2 different batches, like I said, matte finish with the duller on the white, and then just standard matte finish on the red. So I'm going to start with the red and then move on to the white. And I am using a airbrush with a fine tip, so it'll be very easy to control. If you don't trust yourself with an airbrush, again, tape stuff off. You want to do a really, really light coat with the finisher. And what we're going for is just evenness. So you want to make sure everything's covered. If you do it light enough, you'll notice that the sheen changes almost instantly. You don't want to get too close to it either, otherwise it'll drip down. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and swap this out for the other finish and put it on the white. All right. You're gonna notice that when you put the duller, it comes in a little bit slower from the airbrush. That's okay, just be aware of it and know that you kinda gotta go over everything a little bit more than you do with the just standard finisher. All right, what do you think? Looking pretty good. And these are gonna dull up just a little bit more, but this is pretty much the finish that they're gonna have. So I did use the combination of the matte finisher and the matte finisher with duller, and I have to say, looks pretty factory. All right, now we're going to tape off the uppers and get them ready for new collars. And for this, we're going to remove the existing collars, and then we're gonna apply a product called Restore Coat. We're gonna sand it and then paint it. So let's get started. All right, when taping these off, we basically want to tape off the raw edge of the leather, and that's essentially it, because we don't want any of the Restore Coat getting on the actual leather itself. So this process, you wanna take your time with it is what I'm saying. So make sure that you get everything thoroughly covered, because once this Restore Coat gets on a edge, there's no coming back. So basically the way I like to do this is to use this thin masking tape in the beginning, and I go over it and then use my fingernail or a dental pick to really solidify it in those edges. And I'm usually pretty careful and dead on with this, so I don't need to X-Acto knife it or anything afterwards. But if you do make a mistake, that's how you correct it. I do have to say, these are looking pretty damn good. All right, let's finish this taping up like this. Wow, that was easy. All right, now we're ready to do the next step. Prior to applying the Restore Coat, we need to strip off the existing pieces of the collars. So on this one, it's gonna be pretty easy because they are literally flaking off. I'm just going to take a X-Acto knife and cut along the edges, top and bottom, and then it should just fall right off. It's kind of satisfying. All comes off on one sheet. What do you think? 35-year-old vinyl coating. All right, we are ready for the restore coat. I'm a little nervous because there's no going back if I mess up, so wish me luck. All right, for this, we're gonna use restore coat, which is basically a liquid vinyl, and my old insurance card. And what we're gonna do is put it on with an old paintbrush and then use this to kind of smooth and you know, it's basically just flattening out just like you would with plaster or anything else. We don't have to get it perfect because I'm gonna sand it afterwards, but we do wanna get it as smooth as possible right now. So, take my old brush and get some restore coat on here. And then really just let it get in here. And you'll see that it adheres right away. Again, this is the first coat and we haven't smoothed it yet, so we don't care really about any lines, brush strokes, anything like that. And one thing to note is that depending on the factory that made the pair, the texture of the collar and the collar style will actually be different. So some of them have vertical lines in them and you can see kind of like the weave, what's underneath. Other ones have kind of a rough texture and they almost look like brush strokes on there again. And then these have a pretty smooth one. So I'm gonna go for a TH factory look. And you basically wanna look at yours ahead of time, see how they were, and then match it. So with restore coat, the best way to do it is to layer it, in my opinion. So we're gonna do a couple of these coats and we're gonna wait till the final coat to do our sanding. And then after that's all done, I'll paint it black. Now, I used a product in the last restoration video called Professional Vinyl and Leather Repair. And that is available in black, so you don't have to paint it. The only reason I'm not using that right now is the sheen of that has a little bit of gloss to it, and these collars really should have, I want to say a satin look to it. It just won't match with that other stuff. So this is going to provide a much closer match once we paint it. You want to really get into the edges here. And this stuff dries quick, guys, really, really quick. So this is almost unworkable already, and it's only been, what, a minute, 30 seconds? Just gonna keep layering it on here. All right, hell yes, this is looking good. I'm gonna go ahead and let this first coat dry a little bit, and then the next coat we're gonna start smoothing out with our insurance card here. I don't really recommend a credit card because they don't flex enough, so you wanna use something with a little bit more flexibility in it, a little bit thinner. All right, let's let that dry for, I don't know, a good 30 minutes, and then let's add another coat, sand it, see how it looks. All right, first coat, first layer is looking good. It is completely dry to the touch and feels kind of like vinyl. So we're gonna add probably one more good one, smooth it out, let it fully dry, and then we'll sand it, then we'll paint it, and then we'll reveal. That was pretty cheesy, right? So same thing, but this time it is just going to fill all the gaps that we kind of had before. So it's gonna look a little bit more white, more finished. Probably wondering how durable this stuff is too, and the answer to that is very. You can wear these like crazy. I've done a number of pairs with this method, and a couple of them are heavily worn, and it won't crack or anything like that. It's a lot more resilient than the factory coating on here. And believe me, this is a lot easier than replacing with new vinyl or new leather. Stuff is a lot trickier the second time around with the second coat because it's going over a non-porous smooth finish. And so that is where that insurance card or credit card is going to come in to smooth it out. But don't be alarmed if you do this and you start to struggle with your second coat. You can correct a little bit of the brush strokes, things like that with sanding. So it doesn't have to be perfect, but get it as close as you can, and that way it's less work sanding. So what I'm doing is using the brush kind of to get into the gap between where we taped and where the new restore coat is. What that does is, again, cuts down the time on the sanding and the final smoothing out of the surface. So if you can kind of remember to do that as you go along, it'll speed up the process. So a question you might have is, how do you know when you put enough on? And the answer to that is when the texture of the material underneath no longer comes through to the surface, you know you've got a thick enough coat on there, and that's when you can let it dry and begin your sanding process. I don't know if you can see this, but texture is starting to get pretty smooth, both the top and the bottom here, and that's exactly what we want to see. All right, we've got a nice thick coat on there, and what I'm gonna do is pull out the card, and the first thing you do is go along your tape line and basically use this to get into the gap there, because we want a factory look for it, and we don't want these two to be united when we pull the tape as well. So with this, you just do this until you see a little gap come through there. That's exactly what we want to see. And again, the more flexible your card is that you use, the easier this is going to be, and ultimately the better the result. So I heard Restore Coat is also available in different pre-tinted colors as well. So if you have black and want to guinea pig it, let me know how it turns out. Right, looks like we just have a little bit left to do. These little windows can be kind of tricky. They're probably the hardest part to get perfect, but we're gonna do our best here. And what we don't get perfect now, we'll fix with sanding. All right, the top is fully dry, it is fully flexible, and we are ready to sand. So we're not gonna go crazy with this sanding. A little bit of sanding goes a long way on this, and don't forget, this is just a vinyl, so if you get in there with it too rough of grit or you put too much pressure, you're gonna have to start over again. So we're gonna basically take a 120, and you can actually get away with up to maybe a 300 grit because this stuff, you know, it's not the hardest surface in the world. So we'll use a 120 and assess it, and then we're gonna paint it black. I'm hoping these only need to be sanded prior to the paint, not after, but if you paint them and you notice that there's a blemish or something's driving you crazy, you can sand it after the fact, but you do have to repaint the whole thing or it won't match. This texture is a little bit different than painting on others, so it does make a blotchy look if you sand too far and get down to the base material. So what I'm gonna do is use my sanding block and just lightly go over this. I'm gonna start with basically using the bottom edge as my guide, and slowly but surely I'll get through this. So don't be surprised if every time you do this, you get a little bit better off prior to the sanding phase with every time you do it. I feel like the first maybe 1 or 2 times I did this, I had a lot of like sanding to correct brush strokes and areas where it was kind of caked on. So once you get through that learning curve, you kind of understand what's going to show up and what's not, and you can correct it as you go along. All right, I'm pretty satisfied with this, and what we're gonna do now is lay a single coat of black down to assess how smooth it really is, because it's a little difficult to tell when you have the colors not consistent, and it's gonna be easier to see once it's black. So black always shows all, and if we did a good job, we're not gonna need to sand it. If we did an okay job, we will need to mildly sand it, and if we did a shitty job, be a complete resand and redo. All right, before painting, go ahead and make sure you don't have any chunks of this stuff left over. You shouldn't, but it's always good to double check, because if you do, it's gonna cake on and it's gonna look like shit. You could airbrush this too. I'm not gonna airbrush this because I like the thicker Angelus paint to go on here. I think it helps fill in just a little bit if you do make a blemish, anything like that. So what I do is I start with a larger brush in the beginning and do the main area, and then I trim in with my smaller brush. So with this, it's okay to go a little bit thicker than you would if you were painting leather, because this stuff really soaks up the color that you put on top. And right away this is looking good, so I don't think we'll have much, if any, sanding to do. But if you do find yourself in that situation, grab the sandpaper and don't panic, you'll be fine. Oh yeah, this stuff is really soaking up the black. So it's gonna be probably 3 coats that it needs, just a guess. what I'm gonna do is once we get one coat on there, I'll take a look in direct light and see if we can spot some imperfections on here. But ultimately, we're gonna use this pair up here as a benchmark to see how we did and how factory it actually looks. All right, I see one area that I want to perfect because we might as well make it perfect. So what I'm going to do is let this dry, and then I'm going to hit this area right here to take off that one little brush stroke. And after that, we should be able to add another coat or two and pull the tape for the big reveal. All right, that coat is dry and sanded, and I believe this is gonna be our final coat we actually need here. So let's make it a good one, and if you stuck around this long, please like and subscribe to this video. Oh yeah, this is looking good now. Perfectly smooth, and the black is starting to look consistent, so the material is not absorbing it anymore. And I'm getting excited. One little trick with these collars when painting them to give them a more factory look is after you have painted at least one coat, when you put your next coat down, after you put it on, go ahead and just blotch it out with the paintbrush edge. And what that does is, number one, hides any brush strokes you might have, which on black can be an issue. And also just gives it a little bit of, I want to call it almost an orange peel look, which is exactly what the factory is. All right, this is looking good. I hate to make you guys wait again, but we need to let this dry before I can pull the tape. And we want to make sure that everything is cut with the X-Acto knife right along the edges before we pull the tape. Otherwise, we take the chance of pulling a little bit of our freshly done work up. So let's do this one more time, guys. Let's let it dry, and I promise I'll be right back. All right, guys, we're in the final stretch, and what do you think so far? You're right, let's just pull the tape. So before we pull the tape, let's make sure we have an X-Acto knife handy and a dental pick. What we're gonna do with this is make sure we separate the new vinyl from the tape we laid down, and then use the pick to get off any stubborn piece of tape that maybe didn't want to come off. So you want to be extra careful when you pull this. And oh yeah, nice clean line to start. Oh yeah, that looks good. All right, if your tape tears, no big deal, like this just did. What we're gonna do is use the X-Acto, and that'll take that off. So I'm gonna keep you in suspense until we get it all ready. Wow. Looking fantastic. If you notice any spots when you pull this that still show the restore coat that maybe got missed or tape covered up, anything like that, just use the black paint with a micro brush and you can fix any of that up. Oh yeah, this top is going to be a little bit stubborn. It's okay though. Cut this here. Use the dental pick here to get rid of any extra pieces of tape. Like we have a line up top here. I'm just gonna use this to push it. check it out. What do you think? I think these look amazing. All right, I'm gonna pull the rest of this tape off and then we'll talk about the final step, but 200 and what were they, 65 bucks? Starting to look like a bargain, right? Some of this tape can be a little bit stubborn, so take your time and make sure you get every bit of it off. Last thing you want to do is see the remnants of tape on here. And we have the one thing left to do, and that is address these grimy soles. So I'm going to use Salon Care in my indoor light box. No need to bore you with it, so I'll be back when it's finished. And if you want to see it, go ahead and view the first restoration video I ever posted, and that was a pair of 1985 AJKOs. I go through the full process there. All right, I'll be back, and we'll have a final product. Finally, right? All right, and after 6 hours, we're back from the light box. So, let's get a drum roll. Presenting $265 Chicago 1 OGs. Check them out. This is how they arrived. This is them now. So a recap, what we did a full deep cleaning. We did full crease removal. We restored the shape. We lightened the sole. We redid the collars. I redid the shoelaces off camera with a little OxyClean and bleach action. And we repainted everything. So this is a complete restore. It's been a long one, but no restoration is complete without getting these in the light box and giving you something dope. So let's roll it. All right, thanks guys. Only thing left to do now is condition the leather. I'm gonna do that. And if anybody needs a size 12 Chicago, reach out to me. Not sure when I'm gonna finish the other one, but these will be available soon. Really nice pair, and take a look. All right, before you go, I need your help with one more thing. So we need help with the next restoration selection. We have options. We can do the dunk from the Overnight from Japan. We can do the Royal from Overnight from Japan, either one. So select from one of those three. We'll put a poll up. If you guys are tired of seeing ones, we'll do the dunk. But if you want to keep the one train rolling, we'll go with that as well. Thanks guys, have a good one. Stay safe, stay quarantined, and let's beat Corona.